So if you follow the home arcade scene, especially if you follow iiRcade, you know that they've actually just released Operation Wolf, the first light gun game available for it and the first game to use Sinden Light Guns on their arcade cap. Now, technically you can play this with joystick and buttons, so if you own an older iiRcade machine that does not have USB ports for Sinden Light Guns, you can still play it that way. But primarily for this video, I'm going to be concerned with light gun support for iiRcade, and we're going to be taking a look not really so much at that game because I think a lot of people have already been covering Operation Wolf and the launch. But what I want to do is look at other games that could potentially come to iiRcade to take advantage of that light gun support. We're going to do that coming up right now on Bill's Retro Gaming Show.
I'll show you, kid. I'm a crack shot at this.
You mean you have to use your hands? That's like a baby's toy.
All right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscription button. Click the notification bell if you want to be notified every time I put up a new video. Give this one a thumbs up and leave a comment below if you want to be part of the conversation. So as I started out, I was talking about Operation Wolf being released for the iiRcade system and being the first game to incorporate the use of Sinden Light Guns for the iiRcade machine. Now, Operation Wolf was developed by Taito. I think it came out around 1984, 85, somewhere in that range. It is a super fun light gun game. I primarily remember it from back in the day on the NES, playing it, whether it was playing it with the control pad or playing it with the NES Zapper. But I always remembered it as a fun game, so I am very excited for this game to finally come to iiRcade. Now, I don't currently own a Sinden Light Gun. I did purchase one, though, and I should get it in a couple of weeks, so I am excited to try this out. But beyond that, I'm hopeful that this is not the only game that they're going to have that uses that technology. So let's dive in and let's talk about that for a little bit, and I want to share with you some thoughts I have on other games that may potentially come to iiRcade. Some of these, I think, are ones that they could absolutely reach out to and get. Some of them, you know, might be a little bit of a stretch, but I'm going to throw them out there anyway just to see, because you never know what could happen. Now, I am going to say a couple of things here. First off, be sure you leave me some comments below on games you would like to see come to iiRcade that use light gun support. Now, the second thing I want to say is I am leaving some very obvious games off of this list. And the reason I'm leaving them off is because of the licensing of particular games that I don't think they're going to come to iiRcade. Now, some games that I'm talking about are games like Revolution X, because it's a Midway game, and we know Arcade 1-Up has a lot of Midway licenses on it, and the fact that it uses Aerosmith, I think, puts that above and beyond what iiRcade could potentially do, at least at the current time. Same thing with big games like Area 51, which I believe is Atari. Kind of same thing. Arcade 1-Up tends to have the license locked on Atari. I've never seen Atari games come to iiRcade, so I have no reason to think that they would start now. Again, I would be pleasantly surprised with any of these games that I'm mentioning actually coming. And then, of course, there's Nintendo. Things like Wild Gunman, things like Hogan's Alley, Duck Hunt. I don't see those coming to iiRcade. But that does not mean that there aren't a ton of fun games out there that use light guns that could potentially come. So let's dive in and let's talk about some of those right now. All right, so the first ones I want to bring up, and these are probably the most obvious, being that the first game that's come is Operation Wolf. This is Operation Thunderbolt, which is the sequel to Operation Wolf. And I think for certain that this is one that they could absolutely bring to the system. If they were able to get Operation Wolf, I don't see why they couldn't get this one. Along with that, there was a third game, Operation Wolf 3, which I believe actually was one that used digitized actors, not these pixelated actors like you see for these particular games. But, you know, they've already worked with Taito on a number of titles. Like I said, they've already brought Operation Wolf. So here's hoping that they can bring this. Here's hoping that after the long time that it took them to get Operation Wolf, that the process to get a game like this on their system doesn't take quite so long. Taito is kind of known for taking their time when it comes to allowing games and signing off on them so that they are able to be on somebody's system, you know, like the iiRcade and whatever. So here's hoping that it's not a long, arduous process to continue to get these as well. Now, along with the Operation Wolf games, there are other light gun games that Taito brought. Another one that I can think of is Space Gun, which is a space shooter one, kind of similar to an Aliens theme, and again, one that I think would be a lot of fun for them to bring to iiRcade. So here's hoping that with their continuation of the Taito license, that they can continue to bring some of these light gun games to their system. All right, so another company that Data East has worked with for games on their system is Data East. Now, Data East has not made a ton of light gun games, but there are a couple that they've done, and this one being a really fantastic one called Dragon Gun. This is actually a 2-player game, so if you have 2 Sinden Light Guns, you could actually play 2 people at the same time, which is something that I think would be really good for iiRcade, being that Operation Wolf is only a single-player game. So for those of you who've bought multiple Sinden Light Guns, this would be the game for you. They've also made another game, I think, called Locked and Loaded. I don't know a lot about it, but like I said, since they've worked with Data East before, there is always that possibility that they could get the couple of light gun games that Data East has made on their system. This is Dragon Gun, and I think it would be a fantastic one for iiRcade. All right, moving into new licensee territory. This is Mad Dog McCree by American Laser Games. Now, we know iiRcade has done Laserdisc games in the form of the Dragon's Lair games and Space Ace. These games were also Laserdisc based. You had the Mad Dog McCree games, you had Who Shot Johnny Rock, Crime Patrol. There were a number of these games that American Laser Games came out with back in the arcade. And they're super fun, super cheesy, and I think that they would be really fantastic to have on the arcade. Now, granted, these games tend to be better with a bigger monitor. You know, the arcade having a 19-inch monitor, you know, might not look quite as good as some of these were in the arcade, but I still think that they would be a lot of fun, and I would love to see these games come to the arcade. So here's keeping fingers crossed that they can work with American Laser Games and get some of these on their system at some point. All right, now this is a personal favorite of mine. This is Crossbow, developed by Exidy. Now, Exidy was known for light gun games. They had several in the arcades. Crossbow, I believe, was the first, and then a lot of the other ones that came afterwards were, I believe, conversion kits for Crossbow. Now, as fun as this game would be on iiRcade, I do have to say I would miss the fact that in the arcade you played this, that the gun was actually shaped like a crossbow. That was one of my favorite parts of the game, was holding that crossbow and shooting. So you would miss a little of that by playing this with a Sinden Light Gun instead. But I still think that it would be a fun game for them to get. And Exidy may be one of those that is not that difficult to license. Again, I have no idea. I don't know where they are today. I don't know if they're even still around and who actually owns the license for these particular games. But it's something to consider. Now, again, I said that there were several, Crossbow being my favorite, but there were some others. There was a clay shooting one, Crack Shot. There's one in particular called Chiller, which I know a lot of people are aware of because it was a very controversial game. The whole point of the game was you were basically in a torture chamber and you were shooting people to torture them and whatever. Like I said, very controversial. I don't know if it's one that iiRcade would necessarily want to bring to their system, but I know it's one that people kind of have some memories of, strictly because of how controversial it is. And I'm so sorry about this flashing screen. I'm going to stop the video for a second there. Yeah, because that's just awful. You get the idea. Again, this is Crossbow. This is Exidy. Hopefully, this is one that they can get and they can bring over to their system. All right, now I'm going to get into a little bit of a territory of, while I would love to see this, I don't know how feasible it is. And of course, this is House of the Dead from Sega. Now, we know that there are Sega games on the arcade. They have one of the Shinobi games. They have Space Harrier. So, they have worked with Sega in the past. I've heard from people that maybe they don't have a Sega license anymore, that they wouldn't be able to get new, other Sega games. But the fact that they have had some in the past is going to give me a little bit of hope that maybe we can get something like this. I know people have wanted to see a House of the Dead for a while. I know Arcade One Up, its name comes up a lot in terms of them potentially doing a cab based on House of the Dead. But I think if iiRcade could get this on their system, that would be a huge win for them. And not only House of the Dead, but other games that Sega did, like the Virtua Cop series. I think for sure the first couple of Virtua Cops they could easily get on their system. You start getting into Virtua Cop 3, and I think maybe it's a system that perhaps the arcade wouldn't be able to emulate. Not totally sure, but I think House of the Dead, I think some of the early Virtua Cop ones are ones that they could absolutely do. I think people would go nuts if they had these on their system, and it would just be a huge, huge win for them. So again, fingers crossed that maybe this is something that they could do and they could bring to their system. Okay, and before I wrap this up, I just want to talk about this game for a second, because this is a fairly new arcade game from a company called Digital Devolver called House of the Gun Dead. Now, some of you may know Digital Devolver as the makers of the Enter the Gungeon franchise, and this is another game in that franchise, but it's designed as a light gun shooter arcade game. It's got that same pixel art look that the Enter the Gungeons games have. And like I said, it's a brand new arcade game that they've recently made. And I don't know if Digital Devolver could somehow work with iiRcade. I think that would be a fantastic one for them to get. All right, so there you have it. That is just a quick look at some arcade light gun shooters that I think would be fantastic for the iiRcade if they could possibly work them out. Now, like I said, for some of them, like the Taito and the Data East games, we know that they've had licenses with them before, so it's certainly within the realm of possibility that they could bring those over to their system. Exidy is a company that I haven't seen anybody do licensing with, so, it's possibly up for grabs. Maybe it's something that they could work out. The American Laser games, again, lots of cheesy fun. Who knows if that's even something that's possible to do on the system because of the FMV nature of it. But again, I think would be a great addition for iiRcade. Then, like I said, the Sega games, may be out of the realm of possibility. They may not have license for Sega anymore, or may not be able to work that license out. But they're so well known, the House of the Dead games, the Virtua Cop games, that I think if they could bring them, it might silence a few people who are always complaining about the types of games and the licensing that they get. And then I threw House of the Gun Dead out there just because I ran across that game recently online. I haven't actually seen it in arcade. It looks like a ton of fun. It looks like a cheesy take on House of the Dead using the Gun Dead pixel art type style, and I think that would just be tons of fun if they could potentially get it. Now, beyond that, who knows? There are a lot of third-party companies that work with iiRcade. Maybe some of them might consider putting together some light gun games that are non-arcade games that could make their way to iiRcade. We'll just have to wait and see. But, the whole point of this video is to say that I'm hopeful that Operation Wolf is not the only light gun game that we will see on their system. I would love to see them bring more to the system. If people are going to be spending a couple $100 to buy Sinden Light Guns, I'm sure they want to have more than one game to play on their system. So, again, fingers crossed that that's something that happens. Now, let me just end with one last thing, and this is kind of a message to iiRcade in case you actually happen to be watching this video. Now, I know that you've given support to Gen 1 users by being able to play with joystick and buttons. And, for some people, they say, okay, that's fine. And some people, are not so happy about the fact that they're not going to be able to use light guns on their Gen 1 cabs. Look, I get it. There's not much you can do about that. It's just the nature of the beast. But let me say this to you guys, and I know you've probably heard this before, but I'm going to throw it out there again. We know that there are other third-party peripherals being worked on. In fact, Glenn Planamento, GRS, working on a control panel that is going to have both spinners and trackball in it, and will work over Bluetooth for Gen 1 cab owners. So my suggestion to you, open those games up to trackball support. don't just stick with joystick and button for Gen 1 owners. Once you start working with the companies like GRS and you get these control panels ready to go for your systems, if Gen 1 owners want to buy a replacement control panel and it has a trackball in it, give them the ability to play these light gun games with trackball. Now, it's not quite as good as a light gun, but it's gonna be better than joystick, that's for sure. It's kind of a middle of the road option, but hey, I've played light gun games on my @Games control pad with trackball. I've played light gun games with a mouse on PC, kind of a similar type setup. It's going to be a much more fun, much better experience to be able to do it with a trackball if you can't get light guns working on a Gen 1. And let's face it, it's going to be a difficult thing to try to get those working with Bluetooth. There aren't any out there right now that can even do that. And I just don't know, how long it's going to be, when or if that technology is going to catch up where it will work with the latency that's involved. So just my 2 cents is if you can add trackball support to any light gun game that you put on your system, I think that might go a little bit towards appeasing Gen 1 owners. Just my 2 cents on that one. But I'm going to leave it there. Again, these are my thoughts on some games I would love to see come to iiRcade that use light gun support. Leave me your comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Are there other games that you would love to see? And yes, I know a lot of you are going to say Revolution X and Area 51 and all those games and that I mentioned in the beginning. Look, you can throw them out there. It's not going to happen, but you can throw them out there. Hopefully you guys are a little more realistic in what is going to come. But you know what? Leave me your comments anyway. I love reading them, and I love seeing what you guys are thinking. And I love to know that you guys are interested in light gun games on iiRcade. That's going to do it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you on the next one. Have a great day.